Hey guys, welcome back to my backyard. So living in South Florida is really great with all the different kinds of exotic fruit trees you can grow here. And I've made a few different kinds of videos listing the best fruit trees to grow here. But today I want to do the opposite. In this video, I want to list some of the fruit trees which I do not recommend growing here. Before I start, I want to give a little criteria. Florida is a subtropical climate, and there are countless trees that simply won't grow here because of the climate. Trees adapted to temperate climates like apples, pears, cherries, peaches, and plums need what are called chill hours in order to produce fruit. A chill hour is generally defined as temperatures below 45 degrees. For example, a Honeycrisp apple tree needs at least 800 chill hours, which basically means it needs a real full winter of northern half America. You can find low chill varieties of different fruits, especially like peaches, that will grow just fine in central or northern Florida. But in this video, I won't be talking about fruit trees that won't grow here because of chill hours. Instead, these will be trees that are known to grow well in Florida, but which I personally have had bad experiences with. That being the case, some of you may have had great experiences with these trees, so take from this what you will, and keep in mind this is purely just my opinion. All right, so let's get going.
The first tree that I don't recommend is almost all kinds of citrus. This might seem crazy because here in Florida, the orange is the official state fruit, orange juice is the state beverage, and the orange blossom is the state flower. However, because of a single disease-carrying insect, the Florida citrus industry has been decimated over the past couple decades, and your backyard is not immune to the same problem. The Florida citrus industry was up and down from the 1800s to World War II. In the 1950s, something big happened to bring back oranges. Americans started drinking orange juice with breakfast. Between 1945 and 1960, the demand for processed citrus more than doubled. By 1970, growers were picking 200 million boxes annually. The industry peaked by the early 2000s when citrus greening disease was first discovered. Citrus greening is a bacterial infection transmitted by the tiny insect called the Asian citrus psyllid that causes leaf and fruit drop and eventually death. There is currently no cure for citrus greening. By 2010, greening affected the majority of groves in the state, and citrus production fell steadily to fewer than 18 million boxes in 2021. By the time Hurricane Irma struck in 2017, most groves were already severely weakened from greening. The storm caused roughly $760 million in damages and 30 to 70% crop loss. Just 5 years later, Hurricane Ian tore through the middle of the state, causing $247 million in damages to the citrus industry, which pretty much sealed the deal on Florida's citrus growing. California now produces 92% of all citrus in America. Shortly after I moved here, and before I knew all about this, I bought a Mineola tangelo tree from Lowe's and was super excited about it. But it soon got infested with the Asian citrus psyllid, which was extremely difficult to control, even with the harshest chemicals. The sucking insects themselves caused immediate damage, killing the new growth, and I could only assume that the tree would get infected with the greening disease. I gave the tree a couple years. It actually produced one green fruit, which is actually pretty good. But with the looming greening disease, I decided to cut it down and replace it with an easy-to-grow loquat tree. I do want to mention that I did recently get another citrus tree. While there are no citrus trees that are completely resistant to greening disease, there are some that have been shown to be very tolerant to it. One of those is the sugar bell mandarin. The sugar bell was selected by the University of Florida as a greening-tolerant variety and is supposed to be a delicious, juicy fruit with minimal seeds, so I'm excited to try it. I still use chemicals to keep the bugs away, but I'm assuming that greening disease won't be a problem. If you have lots of space for trees, this citrus tree could be a good option for you, but I'd still put citrus at the bottom of my recommendation list, being how much effort they take, and the fact that there are so many better fruit trees to grow first. The next tree I do not recommend, and for similar reason as citrus, is the lychee tree. Lychees are a delicious tropical fruit, and the trees have historically grown well in Florida. When I moved down here, I didn't know much about all the different kinds of trees you could grow, but I went to a nursery and decided to get a lychee tree as my first tree because I had heard of the tree. I knew I liked the fruit, and the guy selling them said they grow well. The tree did grow very well, except the first problem I had with it was the awful Sri Lankan weevil infestation. These little white weevils caused extensive damage to the leaves, and they are nearly impossible to control. They loved the lychee tree, but they also moved over to some of my other trees in my yard. I was able to somewhat control them by routinely spraying Sevin, which is a pretty harsh pesticide. The second problem I had with the tree was its production. I got the tree in summer 2018, and it actually flowered in 2019, but didn't hold any fruit. It didn't flower in 2020, 2021, or 2022, after which I ended up getting rid of it. Lychee trees are pretty notorious for not flowering regularly, so if you're looking for a reliable producer, you may want to skip the lychee tree. But the final problem I had, and the reason I ended up cutting down the tree, and the reason most people these days will tell you not to grow a lychee tree, is because of the Lychee erinos mite, or LEM. LEM was first discovered in Florida in 1955 and again in 1995 on imported plants from China. In both of those cases, they were eradicated and never became established in the state. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case. Just last year, the Florida Department of Agriculture suspended eradication efforts throughout Florida due to a lack of funding and the widespread distribution of the pest. The mites are microscopic but can be detected by the symptoms they produce. The mites first create small blisters with silver white hairs visible. As their feeding damage continues, LEM causes the leaf cells to become a reddish-brown hairy mass that becomes very visible on the entire underside of the leaf, causing the leaf to become distorted and/or curled. The mite infestations can result in 80% reduction in a tree's fruit production. Once the infestation begins, there is no treatment except for cutting off the infested branches. The only way to successfully grow a healthy lychee tree is to pre-treat it with sulfur applications on a regular basis to limit the start of infestations. As lychee trees can grow quite large, this kind of work is not something I wanted to do, so I cut down my tree and I replaced it with two smaller, easier trees, a Pickering mango and a Macaque sapodilla. The next tree on this list is one that I still have and still hoping to hold on to, the Jabuticaba. The Jabuticaba is a pretty popular tree for South Florida exotic growers. The tree can be kept very small, it's naturally just kind of like a big bush, and the fruit are just amazing. They look like big grapes, but they have the most wonderful exotic tropical flavor. The problem comes with trying to grow the trees. I got my tree in November 2020, and it was already a nice size, about 3 feet tall and quite bushy. But as I'm coming up on having it for 4 years, I have still yet to see a flower. I can have patience for a healthy tree. I have some other trees that are that old, like my jackfruit and my sapote, which are growing nice and still have not produced fruit. But the difference with the Jabuticaba is it's really just struggling along. The Jabuticaba is a demanding tree. I initially planted it straight into the ground where it struggled. The leaves were always turning brown and crunchy and it just never looked good. Jabuticaba requires acidic soil and a lot of water, both of which are hard to come by in my nutrient-lacking sandy backyard. Exactly 1 year after planting it in the ground, I decided to dig it up and put it back in a pot with some nice acidic potting soil. It quickly came back to life and thrived. The thing is, I don't really want potted trees long term. I'd much rather have established trees in the ground which require minimal maintenance. I kept it in a pot until November 2021 until April 2024, so a good 2.5 years, and then decided to try planting it again, thinking maybe it will do better this time around being a bigger tree. Well, it's now been in the ground for almost 5 months and it's kind of struggling again. I'll give it a little longer, but I may end up putting it back in a pot and leaving it there. With all this hassle, plus the fact that it's been 4 years without a single fruit, I can't really put Jabuticaba at the top of my list of recommendations. If you have limited space and patience, it can be a good one to keep in a pot since it does seem to thrive in a pot. I'll keep it for as long as I can, but if I were starting my garden from the beginning again, I'd probably skip the Jabuticaba. The next tree on my list may be a bit controversial, this one being the Barbados Cherry, also called the Acerola Cherry. I was kind of lured into this one. Shortly after I moved here to Florida, I was in Home Depot and saw this tree being sold, simply described as a cherry tree. Not knowing anything about what this tree actually was, I thought to myself, oh cool, I love cherries. So I stuffed it in the back seat of my Nissan Altima and drove it home. Little did I know this was not the delicious Bing cherries that you buy in the grocery store, but something completely different. The tree actually flowered and produced fruit extremely quickly, but in my opinion, the fruit is just not good. The flavor is fine, they're quite juicy and pretty sweet, but each one has 3 big inedible seeds and very little flesh, so you kind of just suck the juice out and spit out the seeds. They're just kind of annoying to eat. Add to the fact that they are best fully ripe, and the birds will end up eating them before that point, so you need to protect them somehow. Just makes this tree not worth it in my opinion. Finally, the last tree on this list, and one I just got rid of a few weeks ago, is the Jamaican Cherry, also called the strawberry tree. Full disclosure here, while I'm including it on this list of trees I don't recommend, I also included it on my video of trees you should get for fruit fast. That's because this tree has some very big pros and some very big cons, and it could be great for you, but it also could be a total disaster for you. This one is also not at all like a typical cherry, but I was completely aware of that when I got it. I got this from Amazon for 15 bucks and it came as a tiny little twig. These trees are some of the fastest growing trees out there and can grow up to 10 feet in a year, and mine grew extremely fast. I got my tree in February 2022 and it flowered only 2 months later, and it made lots of little fruit only a year later. This past summer, I was picking hundreds of little berries which are similar in size and texture to blueberries, but taste like cotton candy or Captain Crunch cereal. So you may be asking, if they produce so much tasty fruit so fast, why would I not recommend it? Well, for the same reason I just cut it down. It just grows way too fast and big and I couldn't keep it under control. Another negative aspect, one which I did not experience but I read a lot about, is its roots can send up suckers very far away from the main trunk. This can be quite a problem if you plant the tree near your property line, as it can send up new fast-growing trunks in your neighbors' yards. Luckily, I cut mine down before its root system got too big. If you don't constantly prune it, it will grow into a giant tree, so if you have a lot of space, it can be a really nice tree to have, but if your space is limited like mine, you should probably skip it. So these are the trees I don't recommend. If you have anything you think I missed and that you don't recommend as well, or for some reason you disagree with any of these, let me know in the comments below. If you made it to the end and enjoyed this, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and thanks for watching.